Well, you have heard from ANC NEC member Derek Hanekom. Now let's speak to Carl Niehaus, spokesperson for the Radical Economic Transformation grouping. And he speaks to us from Johannesburg. Mr. Niehaus, thank you very much for your time. I want to ask you the exact same question I started with.
Before you start, can I immediately say I'm not a spokesperson for the RET grouping. There is no RET grouping in the African National Congress. There are simply members of the ANC that support the official economic policy program of the ANC, which is Radical Economic Transformation. So let's not try to create an impression of factionalism when there's no factionalism.
All right. Thank you very much for that correction. But I would strongly disagree with you when you say there is no factionalism when other members of the ANC are screaming factionalism. Let me ask my question nonetheless. Do you agree with the statement that the ANC is facing a rupture as per the article of Joel Netshitenzhe?
No, I don't agree with that. In fact, I believe that all of us, whether it is Comrade Joel Netshitenzhe, whether it's Mr. Derek Hanekom or any other member of the ANC, including myself, that we have to work together to implement the economic policy program of the African National Congress, which is radical economic transformation as expressed in the resolutions that were taken at the 54th National Conference of the ANC.
Well, Mr. Netshitenzhe, as you say, he doesn't seem to take you at your word when you say you want to debate policy. In fact, he says a debate on policy may be pointless because it is simply used as a ruse to hide something else. Are you driving a particular agenda?
Well, Mr. Netshitenzhe is definitely not the spokesperson for myself, nor is he the spokesperson of the African National Congress. As far as I know, he wrote that article that you refer to in his individual capacity as a member of the African National Congress. I wrote a paper on what I believe to be important issues with regards to radical economic transformation in my personal capacity as a member of the African National Congress. The ANC that I joined 42 years ago believed in discussion and debate. And that is exactly what I, as a member of the African National Congress, am doing, participating in discussion and debate about what should be the route and the direction that the African National Congress needs to take at this particular juncture in our society. I was quite shocked to see that Mr. Netshitenzhe seems to discard the Freedom Charter and attack me for referring to the particular clauses of the Freedom Charter, which also include the need for nationalization. Strange that he attacks the Freedom Charter while it continues to be the foundational document of the African National Congress.
Can I ask you this question then? Did you release a document recently under the banner of RET?
We had a discussion group that discussed a document which was dealing with the basic building stones of what, according to us, radical economic transformation should be in the context of the Freedom Charter. That document is there for discussion in the same way that there are documents that have been released for the upcoming National General Council, which are there for discussion. We as African National Congress members have the right to debate, to engage, and to state what our beliefs are within the parameters of the history and the policy positions of the African National Congress.
So what you are saying, therefore, what you are saying, therefore, Mr. Niehaus, and I'm sorry to cut in, is that this is an ANC discussion document that you released?
No, it is a discussion document by me as a member of the African National Congress engaging in the discussion about what the economic policy program of the African National Congress is and should be. And that is why when you interrupted me, I wanted to make the point. I challenge anyone, whether it's Comrade Joel Netshitenzhe, whether it's anyone else, also Mr. Hanekom that you just had for a long time on, to show to me that there's anything in that document that does not relate to the history and policy positions of the ANC over many decades, and if there's anything that deviates from the Freedom Charter and the official economic policy program of the ANC. Those discussions are that I'd like to be engaged in rather than to be called names and to be tried to be labeled, to be factional while we're engaging about policy, which is surely a critical issue for the African National Congress at this stage, especially when we're faced with such a deep division between rich and poor and the need to act in a decisive way in order to address the plight of the poor, especially black and African people in South Africa.
You raised the issue of time, and I want to put you at ease that I'm going to try and make sure that you get the exact amount of time, possibly even more, with Derek Honeycomb got from me here. Let's talk about the land expropriation resolution, for example. What does your document say about that?
Well, our document says that there's a need for the expropriation of land without compensation. We acknowledge that that particular issue is critical as one of the foundational stones for the implementation of a radical transformation of our economy. And when I say that, it's nothing different or nothing strange from the resolution that had been taken at the 54th National Conference, which indeed calls for the expropriation of land without compensation.
Well, Joel Netshitenzhe argues different. He says that you say in that article that the issue of food security and other conditions cannot be effective. Does that talk to the same resolutions of Nasrec in 2017?
What my document said is that we must be careful to use the matter of food security as an excuse not to implement the expropriation of land without compensation. You see, it is easy to try and misrepresent what is said in a document when you want to formulate your own position and to discredit the other. I remain to say that the issue of food security must not be used as a reason or as an excuse to prevent the expropriation of land without compensation. Of course, the issue of food security is of concern, but when it is used in a manner to try and prevent the implementation of a resolution that had been taken at the National Conference of the African National Congress, one has to raise concerns about it.
All right, Mr. Niehaus, I want you to stay exactly where you are. We're going to continue this conversation in a moment. This is Newsfeed, the AM edition. Very good morning to you. If you're just joining us, I am in conversation with Carl Niehaus, an ANC member. Mr. Niehaus, let's continue this conversation. Why have you, as a member of the MKMVA, allowed a situation where members of the MKMVA in KZN took it upon themselves to station and stand guard at the gates of the former President Jacob Zuma? What are you trying to achieve?
Members of Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association have taken it on themselves to go to the residence of President Jacob Zuma to express their support and to say that they will do what they can to protect him.
What does protect
There's
him
nothing
mean?
wrong to be there to show him support and to protect him. I'm not going to engage on the narrative that so many people have tried to engage in, that protection may lead to violence or resistance to any action by police services. That is not the case.
No, but you're not going to prescribe how I'm going to engage with you on this, but continue nonetheless.
Yes, and you're not going to prescribe how I respond to my answers. So both of us will respect each other.
Wonderful.
That is the basis on which this interview will continue to take place. So what I'm saying to you is they're there to show their support for President Zuma, and they continue to do so. It is perfectly within their right in this democracy of ours and freedom of association to do so.
Are they police officers? Do they have the necessary capacity to protect him should any harm come close to him? Are they trained in that fashion?
They are trained members of Umkhonto we Sizwe and are members now of Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association. No, they are not police officers, and they're not trying to play the role of police officers. I, as an individual, can say that I want to protect one of my family members, and I can care for that family member. In the same way, can I, as a person in a political organization, state that I want to care and protect another comrade who is under attack. That does not mean that I contravene any single clause in any law of this country of ours. I use my freedom of association and expression of support to a fellow comrade.
The South African Council of Churches, Mr. Niehaus, they've expressed concern that members of the MKMVA taking it upon themselves to be some kind of private army for the president, so that when law enforcement visits the former president for whatever reason, they are going to go through us first. These are the words that were used by one of the people who were stationed there when we were there, when we were reporting there. So I'm not talking to you about fictitious comments. I'm talking to you about comments that were made specifically around this issue. What do they mean when they say you're going to have to go through us first before you get to the president?
Well, I'm sure that members of Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association, in their support for President Zuma, will continue to care for who comes into that particular part of his residence. Now, President Zuma has raised no objection to these members of MKMBA being there, and I know that they will take his instructions. So if he wants to see anyone, as is his right as a private citizen who can decide who he wants to receive at his residence or not, surely those members of MKMBA will abide by the wishes of President Zuma. That is a very simple matter that can easily be arranged, and I'm sure it happens on a daily and regular basis.
I want to wrap up this conversation by having a talk with you about the posture of the Secretary General of the African National Congress in relation to the step-aside rules that have been adopted by the party. Does he have any appetite to accede and respect these rules that have been adopted by the highest decision-making body of the ANC?
Now, let me first of all say I cannot and I do not even purport to speak on behalf of the Secretary General of the ANC. Comrade Ace Magashule can speak for himself. I can only state to you what the position of many members of the African National Congress and also of an organization such as Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association is with regards to this matter of stepping aside. As far as we are concerned, it is a delicate matter, and where there are proposals for particular decisions with regards to this, it should be taken into consideration within the democratic processes of the ANC, and therefore it is critical that the branches and members of the African National Congress must be given an opportunity to pronounce on this matter.
Where is the delicacy here, Mr. Niehaus? Where is the delicacy if, for example, the Secretary of the ANC in the Eastern Cape can announce the suspension of members of the PEC? These are not ordinary members. These are members of the provincial executive who are now undergoing issues with regards to allegations leveled against them as per the law. Those people have been suspended because they refused to step aside. What should be so special around Esma Khashule?
Let me answer after you made your long statement rather than a question. The reality is that we have to act within the constitution of our country, that we have to acknowledge that every citizen in this country is innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. And the delicacy is that the African National Congress, in terms of its own actions, cannot contravene our national constitution. It is very important for us to abide by those particular rules and regulations and the clauses of the Constitution, the one that I just stated to you. And similarly, it is important for the African National Congress to abide by its own democratic processes. So, as I wanted to say when you interrupted me, the Secretary General of the ANC is elected at a national conference by branches through the representatives of the branches who are delegates at the conference. Those are the people who should pronounce on the future of an elected official of the African National Congress, and that is why it is a matter that needs to be dealt with regards to branches, and also in the context of our national constitution. Surely you understand.
So in your view, Mr. Niehaus, I have allowed you.
A very delicate matter.
Yeah. So in your view, the Eastern Cape leadership has violated the rights of the PEC members who today, as we speak, sit on suspension because they would not accede to the step-aside issue.
I'm not going to pronounce on whether they violated those rights or not, but I'm sure PEC members who have been suspended can, within their rights, in terms of our South African Constitution, decide on whether they're going to challenge this matter or not. The only thing I can do at this stage is to state to you what the basic principles are that have been taken into consideration with regards to this, and I repeat again, delicate matter, and matter that has to be balanced carefully in terms of the constitution of the country and also the democratic processes of the African National Congress. As a member of the ANC, I would like to see that balance being maintained, and I do not want to see a situation where certain people are targeted to step aside, others are left not to step aside in a context where there's then a roughshod riding over basic principles of our Constitution, and I repeat again, especially the principle that everyone is deemed innocent until proven guilty in a properly constituted court of law.
Carl Niehaus, thank you very much for your time. He is a member of the African National Congress, also a member of the MKMVA. Thanks indeed for your time.